All right, for those who came late, I'm going to talk today about advanced reading skills. Now, last week I talked about the first two steps that you need, and I'll review those in a minute. Today, I'm going to focus on understanding structure, because if you understand the structure of a piece, how a piece is argued, then you are on your way to the next step in reading, which is critical reading, reading for analysis. But first things first, we need to understand the structure. So the goal of this live is to improve your reading skill by understanding the structure. By understanding the structure, or how the argument is being made or laid out. And I will go into detail in just a minute. But before we do that, I want to review last week, because it's very important that you understand the foundation for step 3. This is step 3. I'm going to talk last week. I talked about steps 1 and 2, and these are very important to understand. So just as a review, the first thing you need to do before you can improve your reading skills, analytical skills, critical reading skills, is you need to understand what you're reading. This is comprehension. This is the first level. This involves understanding the vocabulary, the sentence structures, especially when they become complex, and then basic grammar structure, basic grammar of the language. And then number 2, the second step after that, I talked about it last week, was identifying the main idea. If it's not an informative article, if it's more of an opinion article, and that these main ideas are mainly found in the introduction or in the title. And they sort of summarize what the article is going to be about, or the book. So let's unpackage that. Comprehension, step 1, here's my idea. You can't really develop your reading or analytical skills until you understand what the text is about. So first things first, read for understanding. Don't read to try to analyze or criticize if you're at the beginning levels. Try to understand it first. So how do you do that? I'm going to give you the old school way. If you go on YouTube, you're going to have lots of tricks and tips. In general, I think old school is the best school. And so the old school way, the way I learned foreign languages, the way my professor in Oxford taught me to learn foreign languages, is very basic. First of all, you go to the language. Before you start reading, you have an understanding of basic grammar of the language, whatever language, in this case, English. Number 2, start reading. And basic grammar means, something beyond beginner. So you have to have a basic understanding of how the language functions, not in great detail. You don't need to be advanced or even intermediate, but you have to have a basic understanding of how English functions, and know that it's very different from how Chinese functions, etc. Then start reading. It's what I did with the languages I learned, and look up words you don't know. And repeat this process. Read, look up words. Read, look up words. I don't know of a shortcut to this. There are lots of videos on YouTube that try to sell you on shortcuts. I'm not buying it, folks. I'm not buying it is an idiom that means I don't agree. Now, I'm talking about reading to develop skill. I'm not talking about trying a shortcut just to do well on one test. So I'm going to teach you what I think long-term is the best approach. So if you don't know a word, there's no shortcut. You have to look up the words you don't know. I don't know of another way. And you keep doing that until you start to understand sentences, and then paragraphs, and then chapters, more or less unaided by a dictionary. So you just read until it becomes easier. This is how you did it with speaking, though you don't remember it, because you just start speaking, and then when you don't know a word, you stutter, and your mom or dad or your brother, big brother or sister will help you with a word or correct you. It's the same thing we did for speaking, but as we get older, we expect somehow that this is not the case. It's the same. So that's my approach to reading comprehension. Very old school, very basic. but very solid. I did it with all the European languages that I learned. I'm a historian, so I have to read academic texts in the major European languages. I went to the library, I started reading, and I had a dictionary. Now you have online dictionaries. It's wonderful. And you can make this process obviously faster. Technologically, we can go faster, but the process still remains the same. You can deduce meaning from the context, which is good practice. There are many interesting ways to learn words. You don't necessarily have to look it up, but if it's a very critical sentence in the article, then you should. But if it's not so critical, you can guess from the context. And there are lots of methodologies, very profitable methods that you can use on this. So I'm not suggesting looking up every single word. Please don't misunderstand me. But you understand what words mean by reading and understanding context, sometimes looking up words. And this process is basically repeated until it becomes easier. Now, how long will this step one take? It depends on you. It depends on how hard you work. It depends on your focus, your dedication. I remember when I was starting reading, any of the languages, I would stay 8 hours in the library and just read. It was painful at first. I didn't read very much, but gradually you become faster and faster and faster. All right, so review step two. Step two, remember, is from last week, is identifying the main idea. This is now where we start to move beyond comprehension, and now we start to read more critically. What is the main idea? And in last week's example, I showed you here on media, you see that the last sentence is the main idea, what will be the main idea of the whole article. So let's just read it. Media became an essential part of our daily lives. It shapes our society by promoting political views, educating the public, and influencing the youth. The unlimited spread and unfiltered information might be dangerous to the young population. Well, to the youth. On the whole, media has negative impact on teenage lives. So that's what this student, it's not mine, that's what this student will argue. On the whole, media or the media has a negative impact on teenage lives. So what we learned last week is to understand or identify what the main idea of the whole article or the book will be by locating it in the introduction or sometimes in the title. So when you understand or identify the main idea, then you understand step two, which is essentially that not all ideas are the same. Not all sentences have the same importance. If you look here, the most important sentence is the last one because it tells us what the rest of the article is going to be about. So now suddenly we have to distinguish in our minds between most important and least important or less important. Whereas in step one, we're just reading, everything's important because we're just trying to understand. Do you follow me? Step one is just understanding everything, so all information is of equal importance. But once we get beyond that, now we start to read more subtly. Subtly means with more detail, with more finesse. And this is where it becomes interesting. So we have a hierarchy. We have to locate the most important sentences. Now, if you go onto YouTube and look up how to improve reading, you're immediately going to be bombarded. If you're bombarded, you have a lot coming at you. Bombarded with speed reading and tips and tricks on how to read faster or ace an exam. And I am not a big proponent of speed reading. Proponent is an advocate. I don't support. I'm not a big proponent of speed reading, especially for the viewers on YouTube who in general are learning English and aren't experts. And I'll tell you why. I have 5 reasons why I have a problem with speed reading, and I want to warn you about this. Just some friendly advice from a professor. Number 1, it forms very bad habits unless you're an excellent reader. If you're not already an excellent reader, then speed reading will reinforce your bad habits. So it will have the opposite effect of what it was intended to do. Number 2, it's inappropriate, and this is a corollary of number 1. Corollary means it's related. It's inappropriate for pre-advanced readers because it involves skills and things to do that if you skip at the pre-advanced level, you're going to have a flawed reading skill, and you don't want that. It's inappropriate for serious reading. If you're doing academic reading or serious reading, speed reading is generally not advisable. Number 4, it emphasizes efficiency. I have to read 1 book a day over pleasure. And this is where there's a problem, because speed reading is most appropriate in fiction. When you're reading a story, it's easiest to speed read, I believe. You can sort of understand the plot really quickly moving down the page with your eyes. But that defeats the purpose of reading fiction. Reading fiction, reading a story that someone has invented, is designed to bring you into another world, release you from reality for a moment and enjoy it. Fiction books are meant to enjoy, and if you focus on speed reading, you lose enjoyment and you're just efficient. But who cares? You might as well enjoy it. And number 5, I think very critically for what I'm concerned about with our discussion today and any discussion going forward on this, is you have no time for reflection on the text. And if you want to become a more critical thinker or think more deeply, you need time to reflect. Everyone needs this. I need it. I'll just tell you, after I read something, if I take a little walk and reflect on it, it helps me see things differently. Reflection is a very key component of being a critical reader. Reflecting means thinking about it again after you've read it. Speed reading encourages you just to move on, that you have to just tick a box. 1 book read, 2 books read, 3 books read. I'm not in favor of that, and you shouldn't be either, except in very special circumstances. In special circumstances, speed reading is acceptable, but in general, I advise against it. All right, we can talk about that later. It's a bit controversial, I think, for some. All right, here is what we're going to talk about today. Step 3, understanding the structure of the piece. Here's now where we're starting to develop our reading ability, our reading skill, by moving from the main argument into understanding how the piece, how the work, how the article, how the blog, if it's an opinion or an argument, how the blog or argument work is argued. You want to understand how is it argued? And I will talk about that in a minute. So, in order to understand how a piece is argued, you have to understand the relationship between the main idea and the supporting ideas. And when we talk about a hierarchy of information, these are at the top. The main argument, we call it the thesis statement in the introduction, sometimes in the title, is the most important. What's the next most important? Sentences or pieces of information. These are the supporting ideas that are found in the body of the piece, of the writing, right after the introduction. So you have the introduction, the body, and then the conclusion. So the supporting ideas, these main ideas that support the thesis statement in the introduction, these are the second most important ideas. So now we have a hierarchy that is starting to be developed, a structure. So how is it argued? This is essentially what I'm saying is when you understand how something is argued, it informs the structure. In other words, it tells you about the structure. In other words, it tells you about the structure of the piece. All right, if that's not clear, you can ask me later. I want to give you 3 examples to show you what I'm talking about. And I'm going to read here. Here's example number 1. Now, the first paragraph is the introduction. And here's where we have the main idea, the thesis statement. Are you ready? So here we have the introduction. The media became an essential part of our daily lives, da, 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 da. Then we skip down to the main idea in the introduction. On the whole, the media has a negative impact on teenagers, on teenage lives. That's our main idea. Now, if we go to the second paragraph, which now begins the body of the essay or of the article or of the book, second chapter, second paragraph, it doesn't matter. The media introduces unrealistic standards. And then there's an example with teenage girls are affected by looks, celebrity looks. And then in the third paragraph, the next idea, the media also promotes fast food and soft drinks. And then you have all of the detail underneath that, McDonald's and Pizza Hut and all of these, Coca-Cola, all the things we love, but we shouldn't be drinking or eating. So this is how this student has decided to argue this. So the three most important sentences in this little essay is, on the whole, first and most important, on the whole, the media has a negative impact on our lives, teenage lives. Then we have on the second tier, two next important sentences, which are the topic sentences or the supporting arguments. The media introduces unrealistic standards in looks and, sort of celebrity looks. And then the next one, the media also promotes fast food and soft drinks. So what's the structure? At the very bottom, the structure is based on ideas which support the main idea. So it's just general ideas. So this structure is very general. It's argumentative based, and each paragraph tells us about one main idea. And they are just general ideas that support the main idea. There's nothing beyond that, really. Now, let me go into a little bit more detailed structure. I'm going to take this same idea, the same essay, and show you how structure can be slightly different. Are you ready? Watch this. This is going to be interesting. Example number 2. The media has become an essential part of our daily lives. On the whole, the media has gradually had a more negative impact on our lives. That's the introduction. Now look at the second paragraph, but first supporting statement. The first TV advertisements in the U.S. promoted products that benefited lives. They were healthy products on the whole. In the 1950s, and then I move on. Next paragraph, gradually propaganda and misleading information became part of advertising. In the 1968 presidential election, US presidential election, and then I continue. Now, what's the structure of this article or this essay? It's based on chronology, on time. It's time structured. 1950s, 1960s. Then I'm expecting the next paragraph to be 1970s or 80s until we get to the present. Because we have the present perfect in our introduction. On the whole, the media has become. So we talk about the present, the past to the present. And so this structure is chronological. It's based on time, moving from the past to the present. Does everyone see that? Understand that? All right, now we're going to do the next one, and this is where it gets very interesting. Watch this. The media has become an essential part of our daily lives. On the whole, the media has gradually had a more negative impact on our lives. Sorry about that. Number 3, I've missed it. On the whole, the media has had a more negative impact on people's lives. Second sentence, sports advertising suggests that you are successful if you score a goal for your national team. For your national team, for your national team. Or paragraph 3, the fashion industry promotes a certain style of clothing and color scheme that makes you popular. So now we're arguing based on genre, categories. Sports, fashion. I would expect maybe food or politics. But here we have a structure that's based on genre, on categories. Do you see how we have 3 essays that are structured slightly differently? I hope everyone sees that, because I'm going to give you one homework at the end that you will answer on YouTube. I'm going to upload this to YouTube, and you will put your answer below the comments, in the comments below the video. So you will have homework for anyone interested in testing this, because this is an important element. And let me just stop here for a moment. You can't become a critical reader until you understand structure, until you understand what the reader is thinking and how they're developing their argument. Once you understand that, then you can offer a criticism or an analysis, but you can't do that before. And so in a future live, if there's enough interest, I will talk about yet a more advanced aspect of reading, but you have to understand structure, I believe, before you become very good at reading analysis or critical reading. So if you want, let me know in a comment that you're interested in furthering this, and I will do it in a future live and talk about advanced aspects of reading. And this is where it becomes so very interesting, because you literally have a dialogue with the author, with the reader, and it becomes a really beautiful experience, potentially, if you... All right, so the key questions for step number 3 that we've just discussed. Here's what you ask yourself. What is the point or purpose of each paragraph? What's the point? In an argumentative essay, when someone's making an opinion, each paragraph, which is essays and books and articles, are structured by paragraphs. Each paragraph should make at least one main point. And how does it relate? And how does it relate to the other paragraphs and to the main idea? So if you look here, you can see here that I've looked at paragraph 2 and 3 and understand that we have a genre: fashion, sports, and then maybe we'll do something with food and drink. So how do they relate? In this one, I saw 1950s, 1960s, and I understand, oh, they relate chronologically. There's a time relationship between the 2 paragraphs. All right. I hope I'm not going too quickly. If I am, please ask a question in the comments and I will get to them. Now let's just recap. I talked about this last week, but I want to address it again here. What's the difference between reading a general news article, what happened today in the world, versus critical reading? When you read a general news article, this is great for step 1 to understand, for comprehension. I would suggest reading general news articles. They're easier to comprehend. They have a very simple structure. You don't have to worry about argumentation. It just tells you this happened, this, then this, then this happened. So it's a very simple structure. I would recommend news articles for pleasure and for step number 1. But once we move to step number 2 and 3, we need to read more academic articles or opinion-based articles in good newspapers or online blogs. If they're well written, they will be well structured, which means they will have an idea per paragraph. You'll be able to understand how this paragraph relates to the preceding and subsequent paragraphs. All right. So critical reading, when you're reading news articles, you don't think about what's most important. You're just informing yourself. When you start to read critically, you're looking for the main idea and then the supporting ideas. So you're looking for the most important information, because not all sentences, not all information is the same. And that's very important to understand. So what are the key ideas that I've tried to address today? When you understand the structure and how the main idea is argued, you are then in a position, you are then able to analyze or criticize it positively or negatively. But if you don't understand the structure, your criticism or your analysis is probably flawed. F-L-A-W-E-D. Flawed is something that's wrong. It's an error. It's flawed. All right. Another idea I want to communicate today, understand structure first. Don't go into too much detail. And this is what young readers or inexperienced critical readers do. They make the mistake of thinking that all information is the same, of the same importance. And when you're reading an academic or an important sort of argumentative text, all information is not the same. It's important to understand the key argument and the structure of the argument, and then get into detail. If you go into detail first, I can guarantee you, in 99% of the cases, you will become confused. That's how people get confused, is they go into too much detail too quickly without the big picture. Grasp the big picture, and then the details more easily fall into place. So when I'm talking to students and they're struggling and they're confused, in many cases or most cases, it's because they went into too much detail too quickly without understanding the big picture, the structure of the argument. All right. Now, here's your homework. Are you ready? I'm going to upload this to YouTube so you can find it on YouTube. I would like you to tell me what the structure of this is. You can take a screenshot, but don't answer me in a direct message. Please place it on my YouTube, under my YouTube channel, and I will address all of the answers there. So this is your homework. What is the structure of the argument? How is the author arguing this? And it's on modes of transportation. Planes, airplanes, bicycles, or automobiles. In this case, it's automobiles. So take a look at that if you want to do it, and then I will provide commentary, and I will provide the answer actually in the comments under my YouTube channel, which is chris.korten, and there will be a link. You can see the circle on the right. The link is always in my bio at the top. All right, I'm waiting for questions, and I'll just want to say thank you all. I'm going to do questions now, but we meet every Wednesday at the same time. And if you liked this live, if you profited from it, and I can tell you, I've looked on YouTube, and no one's teaching reading in this way. I think it's really worth listening to, and I will go into more detail if you'd like later, but tell your friends about this video because I think they can learn a proper method to approaching reading skills, and specifically reading analytical skills. All right, let's go to your questions. Do we have any questions? This is a great question, actually. What is analytical skills? I'm going to talk about it next week. Well, no, if we do advanced reading, I'm going to talk about it. But you can't analyze a text until you understand it. So these first 3 steps are gradually a more detailed understanding, beginning with just understanding what the text is about, then identifying a main idea, then identifying structure. Once you have that, then you can begin to analyze. So you can ask questions like this. So remember the example with chronology, with time. You can ask, this is an analytical question that I would ask when I'm reading. Okay, is chronology the best way to explain the gradual decline of advertising? Or is there a better way to explain it? Maybe by genre. So that's an analytical question. I can analyze. Here's another question. Would it be better to analyze the decline of media by country or by geography? So that's an analytical question. Once you know the structure of the argument, then you can begin to question the reader's choice of their argument. And that's where the analysis comes in. That is exactly what analytical skills are. And if there's an interest, and this is where it becomes a really beautiful experience, if you're reading and you enjoy this sort of interaction with the reader, with the writer, if you're interested, I will show you exactly how you can develop these analytical skills. But in short, analytical skills are developed by asking good questions. But in the beginning, you will ask poor questions because that's how you are. That's how everyone is. You develop, your analytical skills develop by asking more questions and understanding which questions are good, which questions are valid, and which questions are less valid. And so questioning is part of this reading analysis. Great question, by the way. Okay, thank you, Amber. I'm Amber. Thank you. All right. I won't do pronunciation today. I just want to focus on critical reading. This is very good. Very good question here from someone I can't see. Is critical reading and critical thinking the same? There's a huge overlap. And let me tell you, there's a huge overlap. So let me tell you how they are similar. When you're critically reading, you're doing two things. You're understanding how someone else is critically thinking, the writer, and then you're asking questions about their structure, about their writing, which is your critical thinking. So when you're critically reading, you are exposing yourself to critical thinking in two ways. From the writer, his writing, because good writing is critical thinking, and by your questioning, your reaction to the writing. So that is critical thinking. It's very much related to reading. And this is why I love it, because in today's society, most of us don't have access to the great thinkers. Well, we do thanks to YouTube and other things. But when we read a good book that's well thought out, you have someone offering their critical thinking to you. So try to understand how they think, what direction. This is a beautiful way to get into the mind of some of the most brilliant people. And then you can begin to ask questions about their arguments. That is critical thinking in action while you're reading. All right, someone has asked, a lot of people, for some reason, a few people asked about Oxford. I did graduate from Oxford, and I will just tell you one anecdote. An anecdote is a short story about my reading, the influence I got at Oxford. So I did a doctorate at Oxford with the Regius Professor of History, which is the top historian at the University of Oxford. I was very fortunate to sit under, at the feet of, learn from a genius, but a genius in a very paternal sense, very, very kind, but very, very bright, very gifted. And I was influenced by how he learned to read. And I remember having this discussion with his wife. He's now retired. They're quite old, but lovely people. And he would go to the library. He can speak 13 languages. And he gives lectures in many of these languages, and including fluent in Hungarian, and he's a Brit. So you understand, if you're English and you're fluent in Hungarian, you know you've done something. But he can speak 13 languages. But what he would do is he would go to the library, he would understand the basic grammar, go to the library and open up a book and start to read and look up words he didn't know. So I was greatly influenced by my Oxford experience and by my supervisor. It gave me the confidence that if he can do it, maybe I can too. All right. All right, I've given you homework. Someone's asked about homework. I'll give more homework later because I think this is really important, and I would like to help you because honestly, very few teachers that I'm seeing on YouTube are talking in a way that I think they should be talking about. This gradual development of reading skills is so very important, but I'm not seeing it articulated in a cogent or clear manner. All right. Hello, Cambodia. Nice to see you. All right. I'm looking for questions directly related to English. You're welcome. Yakubova, Sarah. The question, Sarah has asked a question, does the meaning of the word depend on the sentence? So I talked about reading in context. Sometimes you can get clues as to what the word might mean. And in many cases, this will work. In a few cases, you'll have to look up the word if you're genuinely not clear, but oftentimes the sentence gives you a clue as to what the word means. And I would practice that and have confidence in that. And it will also save you time. I know time's an issue for a lot of you. If you want to save time, practice understanding words in context and not looking up every word. What's the best method of reading is what I'm talking about. First of all, it depends on your purpose. But the best method of reading is reading. This is a very traditional view. You don't improve reading by watching YouTube videos. You improve your reading by reading. Now, I'm telling you how to improve it in today's video by first understanding, what the words and structures mean, and then now thinking more deeply about the passages. But most people just need to read, not watch how to read, but read. Most people aren't reading enough. Most of the people who ask me how to improve their reading aren't reading. This is my experience. Because if you're reading, you will see how quickly you improve. I remember when I was in Italy and in Germany and Poland and all these places, I would go to the library and I would read Russia as well. I read Russian 8 hours a day and you finally start to get it. There's no substitute for hard work. Now, my goal was to read. I'm not a great speaker, but I can understand and I can read at fairly good levels in some of these languages. But I know that if someone's asking me the question, how can I read faster? They're not reading at all in most cases. If you start reading and you consistently read, these questions will be naturally answered. So my advice to most of you is start reading or read more if it's important for you. All right, I think all right, we have some questions. Yorgi has a question. I will save this. Hello, Nepal. Can you repeat the third point? I don't remember the third point, actually. All right, I think here, I think I'm going to finish now. I don't see this. So if you have any questions, you can write me directly. I want to just address this final one because I think it's really important. And thank you for, I think it's Imam has asked this. Does reading help in speaking? I can tell you for me, it's helped a lot. If some of you, I know that some teachers, English teachers, have said, Chris, or professor, you use words I've never heard of, or words that even native speakers don't often use. I chalk that up to chalk something up to is I attribute that. I believe that it's because, so I chalk it up to reading. I read erudite texts. Erudite means very learned, E-R-U-D-I-T-E. I read learned texts from very smart people who use very interesting words, and then I just copy them. I use these words in my own context for my own purposes. And I like to always expand my vocabulary. So I'm always experimenting with new words. And so yes, for me, reading has helped my speaking. But I think in the beginning, for young learners, it might not be so noticeable that you are assisted or helped by reading. But later, as you become more advanced, I think you will see a more direct correlation between your reading lexicon and your active speaking one. All right, I just want to say thank you all for a very good lesson. I hope it was profitable. If you have any more specific questions, you can DM me. Be sure to tell a friend about my YouTube video and do the homework. I'm very curious to see how you guys understand structure. This is really important if we want to move on to the real analytical skills of reading, which is where reading and critical thinking become really enjoyable. Have a great evening or a great afternoon or a great night, and see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.